have a permit at the Howard F. Byrne wastewater discharge into Hillsborough Bay. They were required to do some environmental monitoring. They actually kickstarted a voluntary transect monitoring program in Tampa Bay in the late 1990s. And we basically have taken that over as that program and have been conducting it ever since. So that program is more on the ground. So we get volunteer scientists out at about 60 or so different transects throughout Tampa Bay to assess and have a little bit more refined estimates of species composition and probability bay cover abundance at those discrete transect sites. So we usually do that at the end of the summer growing season just to get a characterization of like the full extent of seagrasses in the bay proper. So again, those programs are both ongoing. The one on the left is every 2 years. The one on the right is every year. And we kind of fill in the gaps with other information and these projects as we go. So this is basically the results of some of those aerial photography that was acquired from the Water Management District. Like I said, we've seen very positive improvements related to those water quality improvements that were showed you previously up to about the 2016 period. From about 2014 through 2018, we were actually exceeding our recovery goal, the big red line. And in 2020, we actually increased it to 40,000 acres. We thought that since the bay was showing this much seagrasses, we set a new bright line for maintaining those seagrasses in the bay, baywide. But unfortunately, since that time, we saw some precipitous declines in our total seagrass coverage to the tune of about 11,000 acres going into 2022, which was the last assessment before the most current one in 2024. And we've seen some positive signs of improvement with this latest assessment. This is right before, this was actually the winter before the hurricane. So we're still unsure sort of the status of overall coverage since this past fall. But we do have some transect information to kind of fill in that gap until the Water Management District gets out there again and acquires new photos, which is planned for the end of this year. But overall, like I said, we were doing really good until about 2016. We saw general declines throughout Southwest Florida in terms of seagrass coverages. So the Tampa Bay was not unique in this fact of losses. And as many of you know, there's been ongoing issues in Indian River Lagoon going all the way back to 2010 that they're still trying to recover from. This gave us a lot of pause, a lot of concern in terms of seeing this precipitous decline. It's very easy to lose seagrasses, but it's hard to get them back. We all know sort of the life history of seagrasses. It's not easy to get 11,000 acres back in an estuarine system. It's highly urbanized. So that's a lot of our focus now moving forward. Again, some positive news in this last assessment. We saw about 5% increase in seagrasses in 2024, 1,400 additional acres, but we're still well short of that 40,000 acre baywide goal. And if you split that out to each of the bay segments, to start revealing some of the sort of core issues I'm going to talk about later in the presentation. Seen fairly stable seagrass beds in the middle to lower parts of the bay. Where we've actually seen the most struggle is this one bay segment called Old Tampa Bay. It's the upper left-hand lobe of the Tampa Bay estuarine system. It's where the three main bridges span and connect to the same peak. So there's a variety of issues that we're sort of contending with in that bay segment to try to get those seagrass resources back. But the unfortunate thing about this latest 2024 assessment is that we actually saw continued declines of seagrasses in that bay segment. That is the only one out of all the others in Tampa Bay where we actually see either maintenance or increases. So this Old Tampa Bay segment is actually at an all-time record low over all the periods we have data available to us. We can go back to the 1980s period. We now have less seagrasses in that bay segment relative to 1980s, which again is cause for a lot of concern because we know a lot of fish and wildlife depend on those resources, including manatees. That's why you guys are all here. Certainly don't want to get into a situation where the loss of this significant resources is impacting higher trophic levels. So our continued management and trying to get these seagrass resources back is one of our primary focuses at the Tampa Bay Estuary Program. And then this is going to get washed out, but I would direct you to this resource. We have a lot of open science dashboards and products that are available. All this data is available through our websites. I'll provide links throughout this presentation. If you go to this link, this will provide some information on the actual transect information that we collect on a yearly basis. You can sort of see it on the left. These are the actual transect sites that are monitored by volunteers on an annual basis. And then we have a summary report card that is based on the frequency of occurrence of seagrass resources along those variants of seagrass transects. So the darker blues generally mean a better condition in terms of observing seagrasses. So like I said, the 2016 period coincided with some of those coverage estimates. We saw darker blue conditions, better seagrass coverage along with all those transects. Since that time, we've seen some additional losses, and this is broken up by the major bay segments, like I was talking about in terms of water quality as well as seagrass. When you combine those things, you get a little bit different picture of species level sort of contributions to the overall coverage. This is extrapolating some of that transect information and putting it on the district's aerial coverage estimates. Tampa Bay is a Howell-Dooley shoalgrass dominated system. That is generally the largest component of the seagrass resource community in Tampa Bay. And those significant increases as well as those significant losses that we've seen have been primarily related to large changes in Howell-Dooley shoalgrass coverage in the bay, particularly in that old Tampa Bay segment. So really the only significant trends we see in terms of seagrass coverage in terms of this 1998 period, when you look at species level coverage estimates, is for Syringodium, which is this hash level. We've actually been seeing more Syringodium in Tampa Bay than we have past, which is positive news. Glassy has been, I would say, stable for the past several decades. Really, the grayer bar, sort of the increases that we've seen up in 2016 and the losses have been related to Howell-Dooley dominated seagrass beds throughout Tampa Bay. And Howell-Dooley is a pioneering species. Oftentimes it is in the upper estuary where we have dynamic water quality conditions that are a whole lot harder to manage for. But it's still a vital component of the seagrass community and coverage in Tampa Bay and an important food source in certain areas where there might be warm water refugia that we'd be targeting in the future. So trying to restore those seagrass beds where they've been lost is, like I said, a primary concern for the estuary program. This kind of reiterated what I just said. This is breaking out the transect information just for old Tampa Bay. Like I said, you saw pretty decent conditions between the 2010 to 2016 period, and then sort of that waning of frequency of occurrence of seagrasses at this transect site since that time period. This bar is Howell-Dooley. This is frequency of occurrence of seagrasses in total. Like I said, the pattern of old Tampa Bay is primarily driven by gains and losses of Howell-Dooley seagrass coverage in that bay segment. Some of the troubling things that we're seeing now is both Syringodium and Thalassia beds in that bay segment have also shown some declines even over this recent period. So again, kind of forming some hypotheses of why that's occurring, but we might be reaching a tipping point.
Hey, what's going on? You were texting me crazy, blowing up my phone. So. What? No, I was asking, you were texting a lot, and I was trying to figure out what was going on. Anyway, I left the house. The buildings and grounds people or utilities or whoever had shown up, so I had to hang out with them for a couple of minutes. So I'm on the way.
Conditions in the upper bay segments, we think might be adding additional stress to the restoration of seagrass. It's not that those conditions are out of the bounds of seagrass's ability to grow and thrive in those areas. It's just another sort of physical barrier and obstacle to regain some of those seagrass resources. So starting to think about what we might need in terms of improved water quality, even better water clarity and water quality in order for seagrass to thrive in this hotter and fresher environment in the future. I didn't mention it much, but there is also a persistent harmful algal bloom. It's actually monitored by FWC. It's called pyridinium. It's similar to red tide, but not the red tide. But it occurs every summer. This was a sort of precursor for a lot of the super blooms and other things that happen over in Indian River Lagoon. They also have pyridinium over there. But this species also persistently blooms during the summer periods and sort of trips those water quality thresholds related to chlorophyll that I talked about earlier. And all, like I said, all that is very dependent on how much nutrient pollution is coming into the bay, where we've made significant improvements in terms of atmospheric deposition, groundwater, point source discharges in the bay. We've actually seen these increasing trends primarily related to, we think, more rainier and intense rainfall conditions that we've been experiencing over probably the past 10, 15 years. We're actually getting more deluges that are providing more stormwater and non-point source inputs into the bay. We've actually been seeing increasing trends in terms of total nutrient pollution coming from those sources. So again, that's sort of the thing that we're trying to tackle now, is sort of our nitrogen management strategy 2.0, working with the nitrogen management consortium. And those actions are still continued focused on reducing nutrients no matter the source. That has always been our bread and butter in terms of improving water quality for the benefit of seagrass, but there's probably even more work that we need to sort of focus on, especially in the Old Tampa Bay segment. Been working with that group to explore the idea of creating more of a static load condition rather than a varying load condition that responds to rainfall as sort of that bright line for allocations in the future. Those conversations are still ongoing because it has real world implications for permit holders if they're out of compliance with permits. So we're kind of working through that process both with the permittees as well as the regulators, but we do know that we need some fairly significant water quality improvements in order to restore some of those lost seagrass beds. And there's other sort of complementary actions we've been working on as well with different partners. There's been causeway breaches that have been pursued on the Courtney Campbell to improve circulation along those lengthy causeways that sort of compartmentalize the Old Tampa Bay segment and reduce tidal circulation and flushing. We think that's another strategy that we could pursue. And there's buku opportunities to kind of look at some of the areas that have been ditched and drained, some of the tidal creek areas that have been managed primarily for stormwater flood control. Think about what opportunities to improve water quality, so the quality of that stormwater coming into the bay can be improved in the future, as well as other habitat restoration opportunities that might have water quality benefits that don't necessarily relate to nutrient reductions, nutrient pollution reductions, like oyster restoration. We know they have a filtering capacity in the bay that can improve water quality as well. So those are sort of the core activities that we're kind of focused on. And as the estuary program, our job is to kind of translate all that science. There's a link to this management brief that we've been involving our policy board, which is basically elected officials throughout this region from county and city governments. Those are my bosses that I have to report to. It's giving them the information on what the concern is, the status and trends of the resource, and sort of the implications, not only to just seagrass, but sort of the cascading effects to other trophic levels like manatee and other fish and wildlife. So come up with a bunch of different restoration opportunities to kind of explore with those elected officials, but really it's trying to garner that political will for investment into the future that we're looking to garner. So I point you in the direction of that management brief, and I'll give you an idea of like specific projects we're looking at within this basic. That's just a video just showing what you guys all know, that it's a vital food resource for manatees. You lose that, we have the potential to impact significant manatee populations in the Tampa Bay estuary. We all know what has happened on the East Coast in terms of loss of seagrasses and the implications for these important dramatic species. So we don't want that to happen in Tampa Bay. We're trying to do our best to prevent that in the future. It is from Ocean Image Bank. I think it's Crystal River. No. So trying to get some areas. Not all areas are going to look like that. But like I said, you guys all know the importance of seagrass as habitat, as a food resource for manatees. But we also know that there's a huge economic incentive to maintain the health of Tampa Bay. We've done some economic valuation studies in the past that we know that the bay supports 1 in 10 jobs. There's a huge economic return to the region in terms of our eco-tourism and tourism-related industries. So having a bay with no seagrass and no manatee is probably not beneficial to our economy as well as our environment. So we always try to use that as a selling point in terms of why these investments are important to make, because of those strong ties with our economy, with a lot of tourism-driven industries. So I think that's pretty much it. I'd be happy to answer any questions. So we still have about 8,000 or so acres to go to get us back to that goal. We're not back towards those bad old days in the 80s and 70s in terms of overall seagrass coverage. But we don't want to continue to see declines, particularly in some of these bay segments that are struggling. So we want to get them all back on track on a positive trajectory moving forward, so that we can sustain the quality of life that we enjoy as we live, work, and play in Tampa Bay.
Well, thank you. I nailed the time. Ed Sherwood. We've got about 16 minutes for some Q&A. I think you had that's excellent. A lot of things that are in my jam there. Building political will, right? Putting numbers to the value of stuff. So we'll open the floor. I actually have some questions, but I'll let the forum members have at it first. So open the floor to forum members for questions on Ed's slide. John, go ahead. Any others? Holly, I'll come to you after forum member discussion. That's okay. I think we'll have time.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's a lot of info. I know you mainly focus on the water quality. I'm guessing that's the number one thing, but does like construction such as like docks going over like grass beds, is that affected too? And I mean, I'm guessing boat traffic, I'm sure there's all sorts of elements. I guess it kind of leads like, is this data like more or less like shallow water grass beds, or is it more deeper, or is it?
It depends on the bay segment. So usually the max extent where seagrasses grow in the bay is about 2 meters. So in the upper bay segments, it's shallower. It's about only around a meter or so. But certainly all those sort of development and permit requests for part of infrastructure have an effect on sort of this overall coverage. Most of the work that there's usually mitigation required for that, if permitted, right? So the bread and butter, like I said, that we worked on consistently in Tampa Bay is trying to improve water quality because we gained the most seagrass back to the direct water quality benefits. There has been efforts to restore through different transplanting techniques as well as other restoration techniques. And we're at a point now, perhaps in the old Tampa Bay segment, where in order to kickstart recovery, we want to think about sort of those restoration techniques. In the future, I know they're doing that elsewhere. Indian River Lagoon is developing some seagrass nurseries to sort of kickstart that recovery. But certainly, every time we fill in the bay, shallow areas, it's probably an area where seagrass might grow.
And then one more question. You're talking about oysters having a huge impact. I mean, so is there like I guess where I'm at, we have like oyster gardening, a vertical oysters, bog sinking.
We go to.
So is that big around here too?
Yeah, we have a bog program. We're also, as part of some network that we're doing in Old Tampa Bay, we're actually increasing an oyster coverage goal in that bay segment to 175 acres by I think it's 2050. That increased it by I think over 100 acres. So we're trying to have some pretty lofty complementary restoration goals for other key habitats that we know will have a benefit for seagrass resources as they continue to polish the water in that bay segment. We have various restoration goals for what we call our critical coastal habitats, ranging anywhere from seagrass to oyster, subtidal habitats, all the way up to freshwater wetlands throughout the watershed. So we have defined targets for 2030, and then overall goals for 2050 for all those specific habitats. Thank you.
And just also want to highlight that you brought up several times, you have a lot of resources available. Folks that are interested can do some deep dives on the website, right?
Yep. If you go to tbep.org, we have a data visualization link that takes you to different resources that we curate and we synthesize and present accessible tools. Yeah, have at it.
So not to dissuade from asking questions today, but there's probably answers to questions you can't even envision now. Take the time to visit sources. So, Elizabeth and Monica. Elizabeth?
We are as middle Tampa Bay. Yeah, and it spans to the other side, the Little Manatee River. Yep. Yeah, for the most part, we've seen some bleed over and some losses of seagrasses in the upper portions of Middle Tampa Bay that link to both Hillsborough and Old Tampa Bay. But the seagrass beds around here have been fairly stable. Here's some of the pictures I showed of that rack, that seagrass rack. It was actually from North Shore Park, where we saw a significant loss event between, I think it was around the 2020 period. So between 2018 and 2020, we saw some significant seagrass loss. Walk along seawalls now, you can see that seagrass rack. Yes. Yeah, and some of the Manatee experts can speak to it better than I, but a lot of the areas around on the east side of the bay, across the bay from here, adjacent to the Tico Big Bend plant, some of those seagrass flats, we did see some more patchiness over that 2016 to 2022 period. Luckily, we start to see some recovery now. But that is prime concern because those are the main foraging flats for a lot of the seagrass that are overwintering at the Tico site. And the same can be said to a certain extent up at Weeden Island. That is basically at the lower end of Old Tampa Bay. A lot of the losses that we're seeing are up around this area. It's called Feather Sound area. The Island Power Plant is down here. But some of the major seagrass losses are up in this area. So it's not out of the realm of sort of forage distance from some of those overwintering manatees, but certainly the loss of tidal resources in those areas probably has an impact on that.
Very good. Thank you, Elizabeth. Monica?
So you were talking about the Hallelujah loss in Tampa Bay and increased temperature, catalyst for some of that. Shallow. Storms of that.
Yeah, certainly that plays a factor. We've done some sediment studies up in this area, and there's been much accumulation. coming from, this is the Lake Tarpon Outfall Canal, which was never connected to Tampa Bay, so that's a freshwater input that it's introducing some nutrients to the system as well. An area that we've seen fairly significant harmful algal blooms, where we're seeing this muck accumulation, so that production is resulting in sort of that accumulation of organic material. Don't necessarily see that too much in some of these major loss areas down here, but certainly along this shoreline, that's starting to become a concern. We actually have seen a transition away from algae beds to primarily fluvial.
Okay, thank you. I see Nick and Scott, go ahead. Creating a warm water area, passive thermal basin. What's the risk of seagrass health?
Yeah, and I know, like we talked about this morning, I'm part of the regional planning team for the water refuge. Yeah, just kicked off those conversations. I think as we looked at sort of like creative solutions in the future, you have to think about sort of all the implications. I think some of those passive basins, the concern for me would be it's exporting organic nutrients out of those basins significantly more than sort of a natural flowway or byway that might have been there before. So we would want to probably take a look at that. And that would be the primary concern, making sure that we're not introducing more nutrients into the system by creating sort of this refuge supportive of warm waters. But I think those are things that could be overcome. The other thing I was thinking about, I mentioned this morning, I think there's also opportunity to look at, this might be a little bit controversial, but I'm going to talk about with you all as Manatee friends, is that there's push now for many of our wastewater treatment plants to look at beneficial reuse of that water. That there's opportunities to create warm water refuge to beneficial reuse of those waters. That might be a different way to sort of crack two nuts in terms of providing warm water as well as additional nutrient polishing basins that instead of directly discharging some of that water directly in the bay. So we start thinking sort of creatively on sort of these comprehensive solutions, not just focused on any one sort of ecosystem. In fact, I think we'll have a much greater potential for buying an investment by those elected officials. So show these sort of comprehensive benefits to the entire system.
Scott, and then Eric.
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm gonna talk 275. I have that on for quite a while now. I expected to me that was expected also to with circulation rate. I mean, what's causeway and get after
A thorny subject for us. We were trying to engage with the department. The breach that was constructed, if you're familiar with Ben T. Davis on the Courtney Campbell Causeway, they constructed a breach in that causeway in 2018. That was actually mitigation for the construction of the bridge, Howard Franklin Bridge now. They knew they were going to impact seagrasses with the expansion of the footprint of the causeway. So they basically provide that as upfront mitigation for the construction of that bridge. And through the course of them doing that design build, we had numerous partners in the region provide justification and support for additional causeway alterations, primarily on this western causeway approach to the Howard Franklin. This is the Howard Franklin. So we were trying to get them to consider a breach in this area because it is adjacent to one of the forest circulation areas in Tampa Bay. Unfortunately, we did not meet much headway with the department. There are still additional opportunities. They're doing a PD&E study for the Gandy Bridge, which is the next bridge down. Explore additional causeway alterations. There's a new DOT District 7 secretary that we're hoping to engage with to see if there's sort of these additional opportunities in the future. But it's still, as far as actually program concerned, on the table in terms of an action that would have those water quality improvement benefits, tidal circulation, flushing benefits that we know is needed in this area of Tampa Bay. Some modeling suggests that the residence time in this area, it's not as bad as any year of June, but it could be up to 3 months in terms of residence time and water.
Terry, Ron, Elizabeth. Ron?
Following up on that, you see everything this morning, you've got pathways. DOT's one hurdle and pushback from locals and use those causeways as recreational areas, then they don't want to give them up to counties.
Yeah, not so much. We actually, through the course of the design build for Howard Franklin Bridge, we actually got support from both the planning commissions in Hillsborough and Pinellas, as well as the Environmental Protection of Hillsborough County, the wrote a letter, as well as the Fall Nitrogen Management Consortium, represents city and county governments as well as private industry. Everyone saw the benefit of trying to improve circulation in this area of Tampa Bay. It's just, if we had $100 million to give to DOT, they would have been sure.
Funny how that. Okay, very good. Let's see, Elizabeth.
That's my rose colored plan.
Sounds like maybe after we break today. Yeah, sounds good. So we're coming pretty close on time. Now, our next agenda item is discussion. So we can still have, if there's any questions on this topic. If there's any questions on this topic, board members might suggest we can come right back to that in open discussion. We have a couple raised hands from non-members. Look around the room. Were you okay addressing those questions and then shift forward to open discussion? And I think we'll probably have like a follow plan. Okay. So I'll go to Holly. You had your hand raised, and then Rhonda, who's virtual. So I'll get to you in just a moment, Rhonda. Holly, go ahead. Let me just restate that real quick for a virtual audience. So the question was, there was a significant wastewater spill at Gypsum Stacks 2021, inquiring about what you see as could have been the impacts to that to this environment.
So I'll go back even further. I think when we saw significant rainfall events in 2015, 2016, we had a huge amount of sanitary sewer overflows in the region during that time. That could potentially have been sort of the start of some of the decline that we saw. 2021 happened. About 200 tons of nitrogen was introduced to the bay over a 10-day period of nitrogen. So that was equivalent to what that area of the bay receives over an entire year. It received it in a 10-day period, and we know sort of the ramifications of that happens. It's a significant red tide event. So yeah, all those things I think are sort of like the death by 1,000 cuts that we're dealing with, especially with a fragile system as we're experiencing now we already started to lose some of those seagrass resources, so we've lost some resilience to those sort of perturbations in the future. And again, it's kind of doing better, trying to do better in the future. I think one of the positive things that came out of the hurricanes last year, we've actually saw, trying to remember the numbers off the top of my head, but that 2015, 2016 period, I think we had like 200 million gallons of sanitary sewer overflows during that period. During this last hurricane event was only 70 to 90 million gallons. So we've seen some improvements based on the investments that have been made since that time by a lot of our municipal governments, task force that were developed to be responsive to some of those sanitary overflow issues. So that's a positive, but there's still a lot of work to go. We know that there's been significant lack of investment in both our wastewater and stormwater infrastructure that is making us more vulnerable to sort of those perturbations in the future. So it's, again, one of our focus areas as well as trying to keep. And it's right about here. Bishop Harbor. So this part of the bay, on average, receives about 200 tons of nitrogen per year. Receive about that amount in a 10-day period in this area. We saw water quality impacts throughout Middle and Lower Tampa Bay, and then, as you all know, there was a significant red tide event. We actually had 2 harmful algal blooms. We had both a red tide and a pyridinium at the same time that July.
I'll go to Rhonda, and then we'll shift forward to open discussion. Rhonda, can you unmute and chime? All right. Well, Ed, thank you so much. I was really quick. You know, the slide where you showed, and I appreciate the focus you had on nitrogen, because I feel like that's a conversation that I remember in the mid 2000s and teams. It was all phosphorus, not a whole lot of discussion about nitrogen. On the collaborative organizations, the cities, the municipalities, point source of stormwater, where do you think they're investing the most? Is they focusing on stormwater? Are they focusing on point sources, wastewater treatment facilities?
A lot of the focus has been on the wastewater facilities, especially since those 2015-16 events. Those facilities that are sort of needing that sort of investment because they were built a long time ago. A lot of attention has been placed there. We're also trying to, again, shift the narrative towards stormwater interventions. Actually fortunate to get a Restore grant this year that we're kicking off a project to identify large-scale stormwater projects in the Old Tampa Bay Basin. That could be like regional stormwater management facilities. I don't know if you guys are familiar with things like celery fields out in Sarasota County. We could think about opportunities to do that within the Old Tampa Bay watershed. That project is hopefully going to identify those opportunities in the future and hopefully make some investments in their construction because it is sort of that ongoing issue. And as we get more population coming into the region, as we get more impervious surfaces, stormwater is going to become even more of a pressing issue in the future.
Thank you. And thanks for an excellent presentation, Ed, and for taking the time to answer all those questions. So yeah, round of applause for Ed. Thank you. At 3:50, we're set to adjourn today at 4:45. We want to have a little time set aside to wrap things up. But we have a good opportunity for discussion for forum members. So this can be any topics that are on your mind, anything that you've thought of that you wish you'd asked earlier. Any other
No, we will have more presentations tomorrow. So if we think of questions and be addressed tomorrow, we'll just table it and agree up for now. But otherwise, any additional topics we'll take.
Sounds good. And before I dive into that, I did want to highlight, as Michelle had mentioned, just like with the Tampa Bay Estuary, his website and resources, want to direct you to this link here. That is going to be that clearinghouse for information, presentations, reports, data related to everything that we're talking about here. So please take a moment to jot that down. If you don't have it, go visit that. That's also where the presentations for today will be posted.
No, so that is where our FWRI and FWC marine mammal publications are listed. So Monica asked earlier about water control structure statistics, and we recently published a manuscript, and that is where you can find our research and all of our publications, including Nathan's presentation. His paper is yet to be published, but that is where we will be putting all of our manuscripts.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you clarified that. So this is separate from the resource for forum members that houses the presentation. Right, and this is public facing. Okay, perfect. So with that, we'll open the floor to forum members. Any questions, items for discussion, comments that you might have, want to share for the good of the group? We've got plenty of time before we close out the day. Anything from previous presentations? Continue talking about Ed's excellent presentation. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I guess this question with Ed's presentation. What's the balance of, I guess, at one point the warm water is going to affect the seagrass and I guess manatees. What's the balance of the warm waters? One over or mess up another one eventually?
I think what I was trying to kind of relay is that the water temperature we're experiencing are not outside the realm of seagrass biology. There's seagrass kind of farm. Just that might be creating additional stress. Another a higher hurdle to overcome to regain some
That's a great question. I might just restate that just so the people remember. So the question, how is warm water, either artificial or natural, does warm water impact health of seagrass beds? Ed's answer is there's plenty of instances of habitat with water way warmer than with seagrass beds, but those warm water habitat conditions could impact efforts to restore. There could be an additional hurdle to all of the other hurdles.
So, like Nick's, when we start thinking about creating opportunities for people who want to do that. Balance there.
Any again, open discussion, anything that's on your mind from today's discussion, anything that you were coming to the forum that you had thoughts or questions on that haven't been talked about yet? We've got more presentations for. Forum members that we haven't heard from. Everybody has a voice. Tell. It's almost full. But it's a lot of great information that we took. So we'll definitely come back to it. Still, we'll give some space for discussion now, but unless forum members have any topics they want to bring up, Elizabeth.
I just to let everyone know here that I recently heard that Patty Thompson passed away. She was a long time participant at the Manatee Forum Spring.
Anything else from forum members? Otherwise, I might just open the floor to everyone here in the room and also virtually. Well, folks, again, open discussion on anything that we've covered today. Any other questions you might have? Four members, non-four members here in the room or virtually. Anyone have some thoughts or questions to share with the group? Really good. Might run out of time tomorrow. Yeah, Reagan, go ahead.
I guess this would be best for TDEP over here, especially as the seagrass experts. I've heard a lot recently, just some rhetoric about, manatees eating seagrass. Is that hurting replenishment of it? What's the standard language that you say when you encounter those kind of arguments, encounter that kind of misinformation? That's what the driver of seagrass loss, or some way they explain instead of what we do to get through products.
Certainly that could be another sort of barrier to restoration, especially as far as seagrass coverage areas, but I think it gets back to your point of balance. Manatees are here before us, the seagrass resources are here, and a healthy balance of populations to be able to live sustainably. It's part of the ecosystem that our tourism-driven economy is also dependent on. So it goes hand in hand with next seagrass and protect manatees. It's a key resource for them. A lot of insurers there, a lot cheaper than female romaine lettuce instead of seagrass.
I'm reminded of the presentation, I think it was a presentation of fencing seagrass beds and the challenges, the turtles getting in there and having a field day with it. So yeah, again, it's just very, like when you're trying to restore it, I think you showed it for like 7+ years, you're looking at a hard battle to restore it.
In fall 2023, we had a presentation. It's freshwater aquatic vegetation, but we had video documentation from submerged caged efforts of restoration where we were planting grasses and we were looking at herbivores exclusion devices to understand how herbivores in the system were impacting the restoration projects. And it was not manatees primarily, it was turtles and fish and crabs and other things that were impacting the growth. That's not negatively necessarily all the time, but just we felt proud that manatees were not to blame. Like 100%. But of course that varies. Just like I said, it's kind of the way it works, and that's why we're working on it.
Stand up in that presentation. What was his name?
Dan Holtzman.
Yeah, talking about frustration of knowing that there was a hole in the exclusion and trying to get the turtles that had snuck in out. Anyway, yeah, Ron.
Follow it along with that. Healthy ecosystems support healthy man populations all together for millennia. They were deferred to seagrass growth. It requires a healthy ecosystem as well. Manatees do provide some benefit besides recycling nutrients in seagrass beds. Seagrass also proliferates through vegetative generation. So when they're pulling up root systems, those flow in other areas can take root and grow again. So that's that whole evolution along with the system.
Again, so still open dialogue. You've definitely sparked a lot of thought in the presentation, but open to any related topics, including your previous presentations. Yeah. And also a reminder, you've got a full agenda tomorrow. There should be time for open discussion tomorrow, but I'm out of time to get to some of the things you might to make sure we use this time. But if run out of gas, I'm not gonna let us go before we're uncomfortably sitting. Yes, TJ, right? Yes, thank you for Save the Manatee.
It said that the most recent survey. When do you think you'll go?
get a turnaround with that by the end of this year.
Anybody else in the back of the room? Anyone attending virtually? Anything fire about or offer up? Rhonda, go ahead. Please go ahead. I'll go to Michelle, but I think Michelle will follow up with you offline. And, yeah, we still have plenty of time. But I don't want to keep everybody. Can we go back to your slide on the possible, Michelle? The one that showed the partner, all the partners that were investing. Yeah. It was near the meeting. Partners investing in. Yeah, I mean, and not expecting you to be able to like read all of that. I think this is one of those slides that you can kind of get away with just demonstrating how many are involved. I thought that was interesting to me because of how many folks are identified as partners that are actively participating in some of this.
Yeah, different points in time. Yeah, all those entities have basically a permit for their
Water quality comes up as a topic frequently, especially when events are happening that are causing problems for fish and wildlife resources. Look at our commission meetings. I think this really highlights that, there's no one entity that can resolve some of these issues. It takes a lot of collaboration and coordination, and that connection, that collaboration, that networking, and building off of that, making sure that it's not lost with churn and turnover. That's really fantastic. I thought this is a standout slide. It kind of shows like we're only talking to one entity about water quality. There's so many people that need to get together, having buy-in and agreeing to common goals. So that's the village. Yeah, take the village, and that's again the importance of these various perspectives coming together in forums like this, and talking about these issues and identifying places where may not be fostering networks, building those relationships.
Some of the biggest actions that were taken to reduce loading, because you have the timeline of activities, but what specifically did these partners do?
Yeah, so the big thing you saw when I was showing the water quality graph, water quality reductions in the 1980s period. Wilson Grizzle Big Act started kicking in that period, which required all the wastewater treatment plants in our region to go to advanced treatment and/or 100% reuse if they're going to discharge the surface water in the bay. That was almost turning off the spigot in terms of nutrient loading in the bay. 1985, new stormwater regulations implemented for new construction that had some incremental improvements with new construction. There's new stormwater rules going into place this year that will have impact on new construction as well. And then, depending on the sector, the repowering and some of the power plants had a benefit shifting from coal to natural gas as a nitrogen load reduction benefit in terms of atmospheric deposition. Switching from different irrigation to micro irrigation and fertilization across our farm communities in the eastern part periphery of our watershed that impacts
Just the way that we transfer, we are a region that produces fertilizer. So just that activity of shipping fertilizer at our ports and the spillage that occurs there, cleaning up some of the processes there, covering some of the conveyor belts so that fertilizer just wasn't blowing into the bay. All those were sort of net improvements, just doing a better job and being a better steward at some of those facilities. So it's not been any one smoking gun over time. It's been all these cumulative actions that we have tallied that since the early 1990s. It's billions of dollars that have been invested in habitat restoration and they're using about a usage to say somewhere in the number, but it's over 450 tons of under that have been included from entering the bay through all those for years. So it takes a village to improve water quality and improve these systems. It doesn't happen overnight. But what is certain that if we delay action, that we're not going to see any progress. So you got to start making investments, investing in those actions now, because it's going to take some time for them to manifest improvements in water quality and resources.
Thank you.
Yeah. With delay, I mean, sometimes that's just fostering that connection. It's hard to get someone to buy in and invest in stuff. You haven't started the conversation. But that's how you start the conversation. You know. So, yeah, thank you. Excellent. And also, thank you to our note takers today. As you were talking, she's like right next to you. Any other thoughts or questions? Going last, yes, you get all the questions during the discussion, but anything else to add with that?
Board members, just a reminder, these presentations are always made available to you on your SharePoint. So I will be sure to send the link out again at the end of tomorrow's meeting so that we have latest.
Well, I'll kind of casually dip my toe in wrapping things up. Don't let that stop you from asking a question. So we had, again, thank you everyone for joining us, all of our forum members, all of our agency and NGO. Thank you also to folks either attending virtually or here today, and our citizens. A lot of the folks in the room are attending virtually. Responsibility to be here today. Folks that are just here because they're interested. You could be doing anything else. Thank you for your interest and engagement and tuning in today. So great presentations today from from Matt Forehand, Ocklawaha River Control Structures. It's very interesting use of those technologies. I'm sure there's really going to be some follow-up discussions on that across agencies. Florida Manatee interactions with fisheries gear, marine debris, excellent report from Nathan Chrome. Publications forthcoming. And Wood, Tampa Bay Estuary Program, monitoring seagrass habitat. Also great information on water quality. I think we had one item that I really captured on the Marina today, sort of like a light follow-up on looking at the data. Nate's presentation and saying what are the items either in entanglement or ingested that those have to use mortality in manatees. So low, given that was low, what were those items? So I don't know that I want to tell you that that's an action item, but if you have the time and interest. So great open discussion as well. We can adjourn for today, and we will reconvene tomorrow right at squarely 9 a.m. Kick things off